From early childhood, most of us are taught that laziness is one of the greatest flaws a person can have. The word itself often carries a heavy negative charge. To be called lazy is to be dismissed as unproductive, unreliable, or even morally weak. Society places a strong emphasis on discipline, hard work, and visible effort, and so laziness is treated as a mark of shame. It becomes a stigma, a label that overshadows other qualities a person might possess. But what if this stigma is more of a cultural construct than an objective truth? The roots of this stigma run deep. Historically, entire social systems have been built on the expectation of labor. Agricultural societies, for example, relied on long days of repetitive, exhausting work to survive. In such contexts, anyone unwilling to participate fully in the collective effort was considered a threat to survival. Laziness was not just frowned upon, it was dangerous. This cultural memory lingers even today, long after our survival is no longer directly tied to the number of hours we spend in physical labor. In the modern world, the nature of work has changed dramatically. Machines, algorithms, and automation now perform many of the repetitive tasks that once consumed human lives, yet the cultural fear of laziness remains. We still cling to the idea that constant activity is virtuous and idleness is corrupting. This is why a person sitting still, thinking, or waiting for the right moment can still be judged harshly, even if their approach is ultimately more effective. We are conditioned to equate busyness with worth regardless of the results produced. This stigma is reinforced by language itself. Think about the idioms and phrases we use. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, or hard work never killed anyone. Rarely do we hear sayings that validate rest, patience, or conservation of energy. The very structure of our shared cultural stories primes us to see laziness as a failing, not as a potential strategy or even a necessary balance to effort. But if we look more carefully, laziness often hides a form of intelligence. To avoid unnecessary work requires the ability to evaluate what truly matters, what can be ignored, and what might be achieved through smarter methods. Many breakthroughs in science, technology, and art have come from individuals who refused to simply work harder. Instead, they chose to work differently. They asked, how can I achieve the same result with less effort? That question, rooted in what we might label as laziness, is often the seed of innovation. Nevertheless, society is quick to punish people who don't conform to visible standards of effort. In school, the student who finishes tasks quickly and then relaxes may be reprimanded for not applying themselves fully. In workplaces, employees who produce excellent results but appear calm, unhurried, or disengaged are often labeled as unmotivated, even when their efficiency is unmatched. The stigma doesn't just question the person's work ethic, it questions their character. This creates an internal conflict for many people. On one hand, they feel the pull of their ambitions, the desire to reach higher goals. On the other hand, they also feel the pressure to demonstrate effort in ways that are socially acceptable. Long hours, visible stress, constant activity. The result is a paradox where individuals may suppress their natural tendencies to conserve energy and think strategically, just to avoid being labeled lazy. The irony is that while society condemns laziness, it also celebrates the results of those who embrace it strategically. The invention of labor-saving devices, from the washing machine to the smartphone, is often motivated by a desire to avoid repetitive work. The very conveniences that define modern life exist because someone, at some point, asked, "Isn't there an easier way to do this?" Yet when individuals embody this mindset in their personal behavior, they often face resistance and judgment. The stigma of laziness also reveals something about our collective psychology. To call someone lazy is not only to insult them, it is also to reinforce our own sense of virtue. If I am constantly busy, constantly tired, constantly overworked, then at least I am not lazy. It's a way of measuring self-worth through suffering, a cultural hangover from times when effort itself was the only visible currency of survival. The busy person may not be more effective or creative, but they appear morally superior because their exhaustion is visible. This mindset creates a trap. It ties value to effort rather than to outcomes. It convinces us that the act of working is itself the goal, rather than what that work achieves. And within this trap, laziness will always appear as a threat. It becomes a mirror we don't want to face, because if someone can achieve more while doing less, what does that say about the endless hours we pour into our routines? For this reason, laziness remains stigmatized. It challenges the myth that effort is always noble and that busyness is always meaningful. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that much of what we do may not actually matter. And so rather than rethinking our values, society doubles down on the stigma, teaching children, employees, and citizens alike that laziness is to be avoided at all costs. Yet, if we peel away the stigma, we may discover something surprising. Laziness, far from being a flaw, can be a form of clarity. It can force us to focus on essentials, to cut away the unnecessary, to design systems that serve us rather than enslave us. The lazy person may refuse to climb the mountain step by step, but in doing so, they may discover a path, a tool, or a shortcut that transforms the climb for everyone else. Thus, laziness as a stigma is not simply about individual judgment. It's about the preservation of a social order that depends on visible effort to maintain its illusion of fairness and control. The stigma is a defense mechanism, a way for society to protect itself from those who might expose inefficiencies, challenge traditions, and prove that the old ways of working are not the only ways. Laziness is dangerous precisely because it reveals that there might be freedom outside the cycle of endless labor. In the end, laziness as a stigma tells us less about lazy people and more about the fears of the societies that judge them. It is not laziness itself that threatens the system. It is the possibility that laziness, paired with intelligence and ambition, could dismantle the myths we have built around work, effort, and morality. And perhaps that is why the stigma remains so powerful, even in an age when laziness might exactly be what we need to create something new.
When society encounters someone who is ambitious, but not visibly hardworking, the reaction is often one of unease, suspicion, or even hostility. We are accustomed to the idea that great achievements require visible sacrifice, long nights, endless hours, sweat, and even suffering. The cultural myth is that ambition must be matched with relentless labor. To aspire without demonstrating effort is considered arrogant, naive, or dangerous. Yet it is precisely this combination, high ambition paired with apparent laziness, that disrupts the collective imagination and provokes fear. Ambition, in its purest form, is the desire to achieve something greater than the present circumstances. It is the spark that fuels progress, invention, and change. But in most social narratives, ambition is always framed as a journey of struggle. Heroes in myths and stories climb mountains, endure trials, and suffer losses before reaching their goals. Work is not only a necessity in these stories, it is a moral requirement. The message is clear: one does not deserve achievement unless it is earned through toil. Thus, when someone announces bold ambitions but refuses to align themselves with the expected patterns of labor, it feels like a violation of a deeply held social contract. Why does this unsettle us so much? Because it challenges the fairness narrative upon which much of society rests. We are told from an early age that success is proportional to effort. Study harder, work longer, sacrifice more, and eventually you will be rewarded. It is not just a motivational slogan, it is the psychological glue that keeps people striving within established systems. If someone can bypass this, if they can dream big and still avoid visible labor, they destabilize the very premise of fairness. They reveal that effort and outcome are not always connected, and that is a terrifying thought for those who have built their identity around effort. Moreover, ambition without visible labor looks dangerous because it carries an air of unpredictability. A person who dreams big but does not grind through the conventional processes is harder to control. They may invent shortcuts, question traditions, or find alternative ways of achieving results. They represent a different kind of power, one that is based on creativity, resourcefulness, and timing, rather than sheer endurance. And power that comes from unconventional sources is always unsettling to established systems. The corporate world offers countless examples of this tension. Imagine an employee who openly talks about wanting to become a leader, an innovator, or even the CEO, yet does not conform to the stereotypical image of constant busyness. Instead of staying late at the office, they leave on time. Instead of filling their schedules with endless meetings, they prefer silence, observation, or strategic thinking. Such individuals are often ridiculed or dismissed. They want too much but don't want to work for it, people whisper. What is really being expressed here is fear. Fear that someone might achieve in a way that undermines the rituals of effort everyone else endures. This fear is not only social, but psychological. If ambition without labor is possible, then what does that mean for the years we have spent exhausting ourselves in pursuit of goals? Were all those sacrifices necessary? Were they perhaps avoidable? To admit that someone else's shortcut works is to confront the possibility that we wasted time, energy, and even life itself in ways that could have been avoided. That is an unbearable thought for many. So instead of reconsidering the value of relentless effort, we demonize those who appear lazy but ambitious. The paradox is that history repeatedly shows how many transformative figures were precisely of this type. Great inventors, artists, and entrepreneurs often spoke openly about their refusal to conform to conventional work habits. They delegated, they cut corners, they sought efficiency. Their ambition was enormous, but their labor did not look like labor in the traditional sense. They invested more in ideas than in hours, in vision rather than repetition, and yet their impact shaped the world. Still, during their lifetimes, many of them were misunderstood or criticized for their apparent lack of discipline. At the heart of the fear lies a deeper moral issue, the belief that reward must be tied to suffering. We have inherited a worldview in which effort itself is sanctified, almost religiously. The idea that one could achieve greatness without pain feels like a form of cheating. It violates the collective morality. That is why ambitious yet seemingly lazy individuals are labeled as dreamers, frauds, or even threats. They are not playing by the rules, and society is very protective of its rules. Yet ambition without labor is not necessarily arrogance or fantasy. It is often the expression of an alternative logic, one that values strategy over brute force, leverage over endurance. These people are not unwilling to act. They are unwilling to waste effort. They dream big because they trust that there are smarter ways to reach their goals. They conserve energy not to avoid work entirely, but to direct it at the right moment, the right opportunity, in the right way. To outsiders, this may look like laziness. To insiders, it is efficiency. This perspective forces us to rethink what ambition really means. Does ambition always require sweat? Or can it also thrive on clarity, vision, and restraint? Can one be ambitious not by working endlessly, but by refusing to settle for endless work? Perhaps true ambition is not measured by how much work we endure, but by how unwilling we are to waste ourselves on what doesn't matter. In this sense, ambition without labor is frightening because it reveals an alternative vision of life, one that breaks away from the endless grind. It suggests that greatness may not be reserved only for those who sacrifice everything, but also for those who dare to resist the cult of effort. And if that is true, then perhaps society's greatest fear is not laziness at all, but freedom. The freedom to pursue ambition without being shackled to the rituals of unnecessary labor. Thus, the unease surrounding ambitious yet seemingly lazy people is not really about them. It's about us, about the structures we have built, the sacrifices we have justified, and the myths we have believed. When faced with someone who dreams boldly yet refuses to follow the script, we are forced to ask ourselves, what if the script itself was flawed all along? Every society functions through rules, written and unwritten, explicit and implied. These rules create order, predictability, and a sense of fairness. They tell us how to behave, how to work, how to interact, and even how to dream. Yet beneath the surface, many of these rules are less about justice or efficiency and more about convenience. They are designed not to liberate individuals, but to keep systems stable. And stability, though comforting, often comes at the cost of individual freedom and creativity. The most convenient rule of all is the glorification of work. From early childhood, we are taught that hard work is not just necessary, but noble. The message is everywhere, in school slogans, in cultural myths, in workplace mantras. Work hard and you will succeed. This rule is convenient for society because it keeps people striving, producing, and complying. It channels energy into predictable patterns. Show up, work long hours, follow the schedule, obey deadlines. The rule does not guarantee success, but it guarantees participation, and participation is what the system really needs. Convenient rules also thrive on visibility. They demand that effort must be seen to be validated. If someone works in silence, takes shortcuts, or appears too relaxed, they disrupt the visual narrative of effort. For instance, in many workplaces, staying late is valued more than finishing efficiently. The appearance of sacrifice is treated as more meaningful than actual results. Why? Because it reinforces the convenient rule. Effort is measurable only by how visibly exhausting it looks. This obsession with rules of effort also serves to maintain hierarchy. Those who work the hardest, or appear to, are praised, promoted, and held up as examples. Those who deviate, who refuse to conform to the expected rituals of labor, are often punished with labels like lazy, unmotivated, or arrogant. It is not that their results are worse, it is that their behavior threatens the system's convenient story about how success is earned. If someone can reach the same destination with less visible struggle, the entire hierarchy of reward is thrown into question. Convenient rules extend beyond work into morality. Society often equates constant activity with virtue and stillness with vice. A busy person is seen as responsible, dedicated, even morally superior. An idle person is judged as selfish, irresponsible, or immature. This moral coding of busyness is deeply ingrained, making it difficult to question. To defy it is to risk being excluded, shamed, or dismissed. And so people learn to perform busyness even when it is unnecessary. They follow the rule not because it serves them, but because it keeps them safe within the social order. The danger of convenient rules is that they discourage innovation. By rewarding conformity, they suppress the disruptive potential of individuals who see beyond the rules. A person who refuses to play by the script, who refuses to equate endless labor with value, is unsettling. They show that the rules are not natural laws, but human constructions. And if rules are human constructions, they can be changed, challenged, or even discarded. That realization threatens the stability of the system, so society doubles down on enforcing its convenient rules. Consider the education system. It thrives on convenient rules. Sit still, memorize, repeat, and be tested. Students who learn differently, who question, who resist rote memorization, who seek shortcuts, are often penalized, even if their methods produce deeper understanding. Why? Because the system is not designed for maximum learning. It is designed for order and predictability. The rules are convenient for teachers, administrators, and policymakers, but they often fail the very individuals they are supposed to serve. In the workplace, the same pattern repeats. Many organizations value adherence to procedure over genuine creativity. They would rather have employees follow the manual faithfully than invent better solutions. Innovation is often praised rhetorically, but discouraged in practice because it disrupts routines, undermines authority, or requires reevaluating existing structures. Thus, the convenient rule, follow the process, don't question too much, ensures that the machine keeps running, even if it runs inefficiently. Convenient rules also act as social equalizers, at least on the surface. They promise fairness by telling everyone, if you work hard enough, you can succeed. But this promise is misleading. Not everyone has the same resources, opportunities, or privileges. Still, the rule provides a comforting illusion of equality which prevents mass dissatisfaction. It shifts responsibility from the system to the individual. If you fail, it must be because you didn't work hard enough. The convenient rule protects the system by blaming the individual. Those who are lazy but ambitious are especially threatening to these rules. By refusing to exhaust themselves within the system, they highlight its inefficiencies. They demonstrate that success might not require total compliance. Their presence is a living contradiction to the rule of glorified labor. They embody the possibility of freedom from the cycle, and that is precisely what makes society nervous. Convenient rules lose their power when too many people stop believing in them. Ultimately, society and its convenient rules reveal more about control than about truth. Rules are not inherently bad. They can create harmony, protect the vulnerable, and structure cooperation. But when rules exist primarily to maintain stability, they stifle growth. They serve the system rather than the people. To challenge them is not an act of laziness or rebellion for its own sake. It is an act of reclaiming autonomy. It is a reminder that the purpose of rules should be to serve life, not the other way around. In this light, the fear of those who reject convenient rules is easy to understand. They are not merely breaking norms, they are exposing the fragility of the system's foundations. They remind us that much of what we take for granted as natural or necessary is in fact optional. And once that awareness spreads, society must either adapt or risk collapse. That is why ambitious but lazy individuals who instinctively resist unnecessary effort are both feared and secretly envied. They do not just live differently, they reveal that different living is possible.
Throughout history, societies have struggled with how to view individuals who combine laziness with ambition. On the surface, these two traits appear contradictory. One implies inertia, the other movement. One suggests avoidance of effort, the other a hunger for achievement. Yet, when placed together, they form a paradoxical power that unsettles and fascinates us. The ambivalent response, fear on one side, admiration on the other, reveals not only how we see such people, but also what we fear about ourselves. Fear comes first because ambition without relentless labor seems unfair. We are taught from childhood that success is proportional to effort. A student who studies harder deserves better grades. A worker who stays longer deserves promotion. A nation that works tirelessly deserves prosperity. This moral equation between labor and reward underpins our collective worldview. When someone breaks it, when they achieve through shortcuts, efficiency, or clever timing rather than grinding toil, they destabilize our assumptions. If they succeed, then perhaps the world is not fair in the way we've been told. And that realization is terrifying because it suggests that years of sacrifice may not have been necessary. The fear is intensified by visibility. A visibly hardworking person fits the expected narrative. They sweat, they complain, they endure. We know what to make of them. But the ambitious, lazy person does not provide this comfort. Their effort is hidden, subtle, or redirected. They may appear to be resting, waiting, even wasting time, until suddenly they leap forward and achieve something remarkable. This unpredictability makes them difficult to measure and even harder to control. Society fears what it cannot quantify, and these individuals embody that uncertainty. But alongside the fear lies admiration. Secretly, many people wish they could achieve more by doing less. The idea of working smarter instead of harder appeals to a deep human desire for freedom. When we see someone succeed without exhausting themselves, a part of us feels envy, but another part feels awe. They have broken the invisible chains that tie worth to suffering. They live out the fantasy of conserving energy while still reaching great heights. It is no wonder they attract both criticism and fascination. They represent a possibility most people suppress in themselves. This duality, fear and admiration, often shows up in how society remembers such figures. In their lifetimes, they may be dismissed as lazy, arrogant, or unrealistic. Their refusal to conform to traditional standards of labor invites mockery and resentment. But once their ideas prove successful, once their shortcuts become mainstream, they are celebrated as visionaries. What was once laziness becomes rebranded as efficiency. What was once arrogance becomes confidence. What was once avoidance becomes strategy. Time transforms stigma into legacy. Consider inventors who automated repetitive tasks. At first, they were accused of undermining the dignity of labor or threatening jobs. Yet today, we praise them for sparking industrial revolutions and creating modern conveniences. Consider entrepreneurs who ignored traditional career ladders, appearing to drift aimlessly until they struck gold with a new idea. Initially, they were labeled lazy dreamers. Later, they became icons of innovation. This transformation shows how deeply ambivalent society is toward lazy ambition, feared in the moment, admired in retrospect. The fear is not only social, but existential. Ambitious laziness holds up a mirror to our own choices. If someone else can achieve more while doing less, what does that say about our years of struggle, our long nights, our constant grind? Were we wasting our lives on rituals that didn't matter? Did we sacrifice joy, rest, or creativity in the name of rules that were never as absolute as we thought? To confront these questions is painful, so rather than change our values, we project hostility onto those who embody this uncomfortable truth. We fear them because they expose the fragility of our own justifications. At the same time, admiration persists because these individuals remind us of our latent potential. They embody the possibility that life could be lived differently, that efficiency and creativity might matter more than endless effort. They awaken a hidden courage in us, the courage to ask, is this really necessary? Could there be a better way? Their existence challenges not only society's rules, but also the limits we place on ourselves. Even if we resent them, we cannot help but admire the freedom they represent. This mix of fear and admiration explains why ambitious yet lazy individuals often occupy outsider roles. They are rarely embraced by the mainstream while alive, yet they exert disproportionate influence on the future. Their unorthodox approaches often seed innovations that reshape industries, cultures, and even civilizations. But because they break the visible link between effort and reward, they remain unsettling to their contemporaries. They force us to reckon with the uncomfortable truth that value is not always tied to suffering, and progress is not always tied to endless work. In a way, society's reaction to them mirrors its reaction to change itself. Change is always frightening because it destabilizes what we know. Yet it is also admirable because it opens new possibilities. The ambitious, lazy person embodies change on a human scale. They destabilize the idea that busyness equals worth. They open the door to a world where intelligence, timing, and restraint matter as much as labor. And like all change, they are resisted at first and celebrated only later. So what, ultimately, do we learn from this paradox of fear and admiration? That our values are not as fixed as we think. that the rules we live by are not eternal truths but cultural choices, that ambition does not need to be chained to exhaustion, and laziness does not need to be synonymous with failure. When combined, they can produce a form of creativity, efficiency, and vision that transcends both. Perhaps the true lesson is not about lazy, ambitious people at all, but about us. We fear them because they challenge the stories we tell ourselves about work, worth, and fairness. We admire them because they remind us of what we secretly desire: to achieve more while suffering less. They hold a mirror to both our insecurities and our hopes. And if we allow ourselves to learn from them rather than merely judge them, we may discover that the future does not belong to those who simply work the hardest, but to those who dare to work differently. Thus, the conclusion is not that lazy ambition should be feared or admired exclusively, but that it is both, and that this dual response is precisely what makes it powerful. It unsettles us, provokes us, and ultimately drives us to reconsider the meaning of ambition itself. In their refusal to equate effort with value, ambitious, lazy people force us to confront the possibility of a new ethic, one where intelligence, clarity, and restraint define success more than hours worked. And perhaps this is why, even as we fear them, we cannot stop admiring them.